Welcome to Connections and Conversations, an advocacy arena podcast, working to increase civic engagement and strengthen our communities. Hello, and welcome to the season finale of Connections and Conversations with me, Dee Batiste. Over the past episodes, we've shared stories that illuminate truth, legacy, community, advocacy, and joy, all through the powerful voices of changemakers, educators, and everyday heroes. So in this final collection of Season 1, these highlights will revisit moments that moved us, words that challenged, inspired, and reminded us of the impact we each can make. These voices echo far beyond the mic, and they deserve to be heard again. Let's take a listen to a few unforgettable moments from this season, reflections that speak to our shared history, our responsibility, and our collective power. You'll remember history and legacy helps us understand that past is prologue. Dr. Marshall, Dr. Williams, and Miss Denise Oliver Velez reminded us of that.
My family was a member of the historic Springfield Baptist Church located in Augusta and said to be the oldest Black church in the nation. There is still controversy between whether it is the oldest or the First Baptist Church in Savannah, I believe it is. However, whether it's the first or second, the church was founded in 1787. And as a kid, what is 1787? They're just some numbers. However, I kept being told about Booker T. Washington coming there, Frederick Douglass coming there, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner coming there. And again, as a kid, I know nothing about this. But fast forward, by the time I've done my doctorate and become a historian and started writing the family history, I'm like, wow, Frederick Douglass? Your grandmother and your great-grandmother got to hear Frederick Douglass. They got to hear Booker T. Washington, not just hear him, but see him, because these people spoke either at my church or at the high school, which was 5 blocks from where we lived. I also later learned that people like Langston Hughes, Marian Anderson, Paul Robeson, just an amazing number of African-American men and women came to this little town. And I think the answer to the question is multifold, but simply one, Georgia was founded as a free colony. So early on, enslaved members of the African diaspora came from Florida and from South Carolina into Georgia to freedom. However, Georgia whites didn't like that at all. They didn't like that they were walking on the same ground and being free and having these free Blacks and enslaved Blacks coming into the town or into the state. So Augusta in particular was a mixture of free and enslaved people. As a result, it just built this rich educational, religious, civic, and social community. And enslaved and free Blacks lived side by side, along with whites living next door or right across the street. Later on, that became very, very segregated by the time I was born. But it was from these very well-known individuals who weren't just names in a textbook to me. They were people whom my family members who were alive and well told me stories about. So when I write about them now, I feel as though I actually knew them because of how well I knew my ancestors.
As I probed a bit further, I found that she was intimately involved in Nashville's Colored Women's Club.
Mm-hmm.
So I began to look at their meetings that they were having because she was involved in the Phyllis Wheatley Club and a few other clubs. And I'm looking, and I see where her name isn't mentioned. You never see Hattie Hale. You always saw Mrs. W.J. Hale.
Wow.
So like all of her work is being overshadowed by her husband. But then as I looked through the list, she wasn't the only one. Began to see Mrs. Preston Taylor, Mrs. Henry Allen Boyd, all these other folks, but these women were rendered invisible. And the only thing we knew them by their husbands' names. They are out here killing it. They are functioning like civil rights organizations. These women are doing what the NAACP would do 20 years later, but they're doing it right here in Nashville.
Under social clubs.
Yeah.
We became aware of was the high levels of lead poisoning in the community. Because again, we're dealing with parents, we're dealing with people with little kids. And we found out that they had done a health study that you had high levels of lead poisoning in children because the paint in these tenement apartments was lead-based paint. The paint on babies' cribs was lead-based paint. The doctors and some of the nurses had given us this information, and we said, well, we're not clear about what the numbers are because the Board of Health is supposed to be doing lead poisoning detection, but they haven't been doing it. So we went to the Board of Health and we found out that they had, thousands. They had these kits, these testing kits. They were sitting there. So here we go again. So we asked for the kids.
Yes.
And they said no. And so we took them. We went around, and it's a 2-part process. You have to get urine samples from the children. And then they test the urine, and the ones that come back positive for lead, the next phase is you have to draw bloods and do a blood test. So we got tea from every baby in East Harlem. We went, and people invite you in, and you get the baby's urine, and that's cool. Part 2 was a lot more difficult because we had doctors with us, and part 2, we went back to see I think it was about a third of the tests came back positive. So we went back and draw these bloods. The problem was doctors are not trained phlebotomists. They're terrible at it.
My mom's a nurse. I can speak for that. And she started out in pediatric nursing. So yes.
Okay. So you know what I mean. So here, this lady has invited you in because you got the urine and you got to tell her, your kid tested positive. We got to draw blood. And here you have a doctor brutalizing this child. And the mothers are not happy when their kid is screaming. The welcome mat was withdrawn. So we had been reading, I don't remember, I think it was Chairman Mao or something, the Barefoot Doctor program in China, that utilized regular people to do health stuff. And I remember thinking and saying, we have a lot of former dope fiends who have joined the organization, heroin addicts. They're not doing heroin now, but this is what they used to do. And they're experts at injection. So we made them part of the team. And we got rid of having doctors try to draw the bloods and instead had, the street term is tecatos, dope fiends, who had joined, and they would go in, bam, get the bloods. The baby doesn't even blink. The mothers are happy, offer you coffee and whatever. And the self-esteem for those former addicts also rose up. This gave them something to feel very proud of.
Purpose. Yes.
Yeah. So you ended up with sort of a dual plus on developing and taking this method, drawing the bloods, and then ultimately trying to get treatment for the kids and whatever. And again, publicizing what we had done and getting press coverage of here. The Board of Health doesn't go and do this, and look at these numbers that are coming back. And we pressured the city council. We had some contacts down there, and they wound up passing legislation mandating that landlords had to get rid of the lead-based paint.
social justice trailblazers on the front line of grassroots organizing, like Gwen and Lauren. We really appreciate the work that they do and understand the importance.
All of the departments that fall under the president's staff go up to Black Lake and they give out a report, and we go into these breakout sessions and kind of get a better understanding of what work is being done in each department and then how our departments help support those departments. So at the time, Jokic was the president, and it was my first one. Very exciting. It's just a beautiful environment, a beautiful atmosphere. And I'm not even talking about the golf course. I'm talking about the center itself. It is gorgeous. I was in a breakout session with the organizing department, which falls under the president of the UAW. And I was in the public relations department, which falls under the president, listening to these organizers talk about how hard they were fighting and how hard the workers were fighting to gain a union in their workplaces, whether it was in the South at these Southern foreign facilities, which we probably shouldn't even call them foreign facilities anymore. They've been so ingrained in our society. And also, the teaching assistants at universities. And it was just hearing how passionate these people were and how much courage it took, because there's a lot of backlash within the community and there's a lot of pushback. And while we know that a union will make a community and a workplace better, we don't necessarily always see, the general people outside of that situation, don't always get to see what happens if they don't win the union and how much it really takes for them to stay in the fight. And it moved me to a point where I was nearly overcome. So I go outside and I'm at this railing and I'm looking at the lake and, the trees and everything. And I'm so moved. I'm near tears almost. And my assistant director at the time comes up to me and he asks if I was okay. And I said, yeah, he's like, what are you feeling? And I said, I feel like I'm coming home. It was just amazing to see we were pulling together as a community to support each other.
Uh-huh.
The support wasn't going to leave these workers. They weren't going to be left on their own just because it had not been as successful as we wanted it to be. And it just gave me the feeling of not being left alone. This feeling of family, fellowship, and they were going to lock arms. We were going to lock arms to continue to make a difference and continue to fight for social justice. And that was absolutely amazing to me.
What kinds of profound differences or impact do social workers make, in your opinion, in your community or a community?
So I think it's important to know that one of the things that are different from social workers than other helping professions is one piece of it that's in our code of ethics. So there are many, many important helping professions, right, that we have. We have counselors, we have psychologists, psychiatrists, different names, and all of these people that are here to help others matter and are important. But social workers have within our code of ethics the social justice component.
Mm-hmm.
That makes us very different than other helping organizations or helping professions because they don't have that social justice piece in their code of ethics that we are upheld to hold that. One particular piece, if you don't mind, Miss Dee, if I could read it, would that be okay?
Absolutely.
So it says that under social and political action, that social workers should act to prevent and eliminate domination of, exploitation of, and discrimination against any person, group, or class on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, marital status, political belief, religion, immigration status, or mental or physical ability. In that thing, I like to say social worker is the only profession that goes from the womb, people are receiving prenatal care,
Mm-hmm.
to the tomb. And I mean that respectfully because there are hospice social workers that go back and provide counseling and support services and resources to family members who are grieving after a loved one has passed away. And then the most important part, again, is that social justice piece. That means beyond providing education, resources, information, things like that, we are always, every social worker is upheld to that code, working to make sure that there's no group of person, as you all both heard, that's left out of that.
Right.
No person left out of that, that we are not supposed to be ensuring that they have the access to their rights, their dignity as a human, freedoms, and justice as a person.
Right. Just uplifting humanity. And I love that. We heard from social work champions addressing the needs of their community and the voices of Kay, Adrian, AJ, and Ngazi.
How quickly can we get her a house? Because I know for a fact that is a process. Housing was already moving to get her back into a place, but they also have to find, okay, well, where can we put her? Because housing is not something that grows on trees. And so there's a process on their end. And so we are all working together trying to figure out how quickly can we move. But we don't want to give false promises either, because it would be even worse if we told her, oh, we can get you housed on Monday, and then her apartment's not ready on Monday. So we're trying to manage this with her. She is not in a place where she has enough insight to understand that we're not telling you you're not getting housing. We're just telling you that it's going to be a minute. We don't know how long. So I bring her in because I do have to do an assessment before I can open anybody, just to get an idea for kind of what's going on, to make sure it's safety for both me and the client. In the process of just talking with her, I can tell she's not doing well. She's responding to internal stimuli. She's not really oriented to the time and place. I'm not quite sure where she was mentally time-wise, but I knew she wasn't present with me in the session. And so I'm like, okay, I need to get her in front of a doctor, because I don't feel comfortable sending her home to manage her own treatment in this state. And so even the doctor was like, oh yeah, we got to send her for stabilization. But we also knew that was going to cause a problem, because for a lot of people, the idea that you have to go to a hospital or to what we call a crisis stabilization unit for 7 days, when you've got all this stuff you're trying to work on, that's actually more triggering. And so we did have to kind of push that process. We had to do what's called a 1013, which is an involuntary hold at the hospital. And she was not having it. She cussed me up and down. Like, our security was actually really concerned she was going to hurt me. I was not concerned. She was in my face, but I never got the sense that she was going to actually physically attack me. But security was kind of there to monitor in case. And they were able to get her to the hospital, where she stayed for about 9 or 10 days. And so then when the CSU called me and they're like, she's ready to discharge, but she needs to go to her apartment, they were calling me to move her into an apartment that didn't have a bed, which is against regulations and code. And so they kept saying, she needs a bed, she needs a bed. And I had to explain to them, that's not my department's area. We are not housing. But ultimately, everyone had kind of done their part, right? For CSU, she's done. Like, they stabilized her. Their part is done. It is time to move her over to outpatient, which is my part technically. But because I'm not housing, I had to explain, her finding a bed is not for me. But because of the main focus was making sure that the client had what we needed, I was like, we will figure it out. I will come pick her up. And so when I went to go get her, she remembered me. She remembered that our first interaction was not the greatest. She even apologized, and we actually laugh about it now, because she's like, man, I don't know what was going on with me that day.
In social work, we certainly have those roles in terms of what we're doing for the community. There are some who are, informers, even in, social services. There's family preservation, which focuses on sort of keeping things together. And then there's child protective services, which is more focused on abuse and neglect. So I have to say, in both roles, because I am still involved in social work, I'm still making policy decisions and things like that. But mainly it is the therapy work that I'm noticing much more stress. The first season of Trump, it was more so about, oh my gosh, what crazy thing is he going to tweet today? And people just had sort of this nervous angst. This particular time, and with there only being it hasn't even been 3 months yet, there are people who are legitimately worried, because not only are they seeing more what is on the news, they are hearing more from people in their communities about what is going on. Or they know a family member who lost their job. I mean, again, I'm in Maryland. So we are very close to Washington, D.C. A lot of the particularly Black wealth that has been built up in Maryland is because of those federal jobs, sort of getting people to understand that a lot of us went toward those jobs because the private sector was still free to be able to discriminate. And federal jobs offered a lot of protections on, not being able to discriminate based on race and gender and sexual orientation and things like that. So you're hearing a lot more of people being anxious, people just, the uncertainty of, are they going to lose the current benefits that they have? What is it going to mean? We have had, I think when initially that whole Medicaid portal thing, when they froze the funding, I spent a day probably in 4 or 5 emergency meetings. I had to move my therapy clients around because we could not get access to the Medicaid portal. It affected all of the 50 states. So when people talk about, well, blue states may be able to do some things if you have Democratic legislatures to provide some insulation, but this is going to affect everyone.
AJ and I live in a rural area, and so there's a wide swath of political beliefs, personal beliefs, but mostly the folks that I am working with. I work for a local clinic, so a lot of our clients are Medicaid recipients, and our nonprofit, of course, we're in the charitable giving, charitable food business. It's kind of the same folks, and it is personally painful to me to see people sleepwalking a little bit. I am blessed in that, I have a husband where he will listen to me talk, so that I can get it out. But it is painful to see people just not paying attention. If I did not have AJ, we say this to each other all the time, you would go crazy. We have, a person who comes to the breadbasket who was talking about the last president and how, this president is going to do so much better. And she's so glad that he got rid of all that DEI stuff. I'm like, Miss Smith, everything about your life is DEI. You're a woman. You're disabled. You live in Section 8. You're at a food pantry. You get SNAP. Now, I didn't rattle it off quite in the same tone that I shared it with you, but I did let her know everything about your life is DEI. And even though where you are getting your information is equating DEI with Blackness, let's be honest, there are many things, especially for a Caucasian person, that DEI is providing for her.
I'm hearing in our nonprofit is working at the University of Virginia. Universities all over the country. Ron understands what's happening at Johns Hopkins. UVA is experiencing the loss of DEI programs. I recently reached out to the vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion at the university, a wonderful gentleman that came from Ohio, Black gentleman, and just tried to encourage him because everyone is feeling the brunt of what is happening. And it's on grounds. You can definitely feel this. It's a heaviness from the students, from the staff, certainly from the professors who are endeavoring to do good work. The Office of African American Affairs, is walking through some of the halls there and looking at the multicultural student unions there and wondering, what does this look like a year from now? These students, who are engaging in conversations about inclusivity, what does that look like for them? And now there are groups on grounds to try to help people manage their emotions, much like Ron was sharing. And I think it's even more important for us. And I thought I heard you say this too, Ron, about building community. That is where I have really been locking arms in and wanting to do more of is at this stage, I feel it's important to build with whoever wants to build. That is the prerequisite. Do you want to build community? And that goes beyond sexual orientation, certainly color of skin, where you're from. It is about building community with people because we're going to need each other in this season. That's why I'm so grateful for you, Dee, in the space and finding that attraction to somebody who is talking about building community. That has been the saving grace for me. And I'm really grateful to that. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that. Absolutely.
We also had professional advocates whose work drive their advocacy in the work from Dr. Katrina Green and Mark, the lawyer.
I got a text from one of my coworkers who was at work. I was going in to relieve her, and she said, just a heads up, there's a mass shooting happening. There's a high alert been sent out to all of his hospitals. And the hospital where I was working then, which I still work at now, is not a trauma center, but should the trauma centers get overloaded, then ambulance traffic for other things gets diverted. The walking, well, or wounded, things like that might get sent to these other hospitals. So we're like, oh gosh, and so I immediately look at my phone, look at the news. My heart just sank when I saw that it was at a school with young kids. And so I drove into work just not knowing what's going to happen. What am I going to see? I get there. My coworker, she's completely lost it. She is in tears. She's got young children. She's like, oh my gosh, I know people from this school. Apparently one of the children who was killed was the child of a doctor at Vanderbilt. So, this is something that really touched the medical community in a very profound way. And the trauma surgeons that stood ready at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital that day, they had cleared their ER, they had cleared the ORs, they were ready. None of those children even survived to the hospital. They were all DOA, dead on arrival. And so, that just devastates us when there's literally nothing we can do. We went to medical school to help people, to heal people, to fix broken things. And when something is so broken that we can't even fix it, my heart goes out to all those doctors that were involved and ready. And you can hear it in my voice, like, this is an emotional topic.
Yes, I can imagine, because I had wanted to go into the healthcare field right after high school, following in my mom's footsteps. I thought I'd start out like at a nursing home, but I couldn't handle it because I got so attached to the patients. And mom's, she said, it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I made a decision a long time ago that if I became so numb to the pain that I was witnessing, when I can't become emotional about these things that are tragedies, right? Then it's my time to leave the profession. If you're so jaded and so numb that little children filled with bullet holes doesn't get you upset and close to tears, maybe it's time to retire from medicine.
I'd agree with that.
Maybe you don't belong there, but that's just me. There are a lot of doctors who came through, before me who are trained to suppress all that, hold that in. You don't cry in front of your patients, right? You have to be very stoic and solid. But I came up after all of that, and now it's okay to sit with your patients. And I think folks appreciate it more when they see the human side of their doctors.
Yeah.
When I can sit with a patient who's actively dying in my ER and hold their hand and cry with their families afterwards. That's meaningful.
We are a constitutional republic. So what that means is counting votes fairly. Everybody that can vote should vote. And then when we count them fairly. So it's pretty simple what the founding fathers put out there. And they were able to do these votes without any big problems, when sometimes it took a month to get votes back to the Capitol.
Right.
That's actually why they have, just a little constitutional history. Why we have the election in November and then why there's no certification till January is because it took a couple months for the carriages to get to D.C. to deliver the ballots.
Well, I love nerding out on some history.
Yeah. As the country expanded to the West, those votes were late coming in, so they had to certify those votes, have them in the D.C. by January 6th. Sometimes it took a month or two to get through the winter and get to D.C. so that the vice president could certify the votes. That's why we have people like, how come there's such a delay? After November, then we have December. Each state has to certify their election. That's federally mandated on federal elections. and then a whole nother month to get the letter, the literal electors signed and a letter under oath to DC, to the vice president for that bicameral Senate confirmation.
We also heard global perspectives from journalists on the front lines in Ukraine, Chris reporting there, and Jeffrey, who is reporting really on what's going on here in America, and he's rooted in Canada.
Americans do not understand that a majority of the money that was allocated through Congress stayed within America. Don't have the numbers in front of me, but I run a site called uamission.com. It's a NatSec media project. And we broke down the numbers, and mainly we looked at the numbers that stayed in every state. I look at the example, since I'm from Texas, of Lance Gooden from Mesquite, Texas, that there's an artillery factory there, that his partisan politics made him go insult Zelensky instead of saying, hey, I want to employ people in my community. And I think that when people see the amount of money that is, used to employ people in their communities to essentially rebuild the machinery that runs the U.S. Army, runs the Navy, that's what they're doing with it. And then what happens is the excess materials and old materials that would cost a certain amount of money to be destroyed actually cost less to just put on pallets and send to Ukraine to defend themselves. Then comes the foreign national policy issues. Russia clearly wants Europe to collapse, wants America's footprint to be highly withdrawn. And I think that those people who think that's a good thing need to count their resources like way far in advance, because the United States benefits, for instance, from a lot of the relationships that we are now screwing over in Europe, being hostile randomly to China for no reason. I mean, there's problems with a lot of parts where we don't address with at all. We just stay stuck in this perpetual name calling for China, a complete ignorance under Trump of what Russia is trying to achieve. So I think the average Americans need to get with it to say, well, no, we don't like this slide towards appealing to Russia to find its sanity. Russia is not going to find its sanity. Russia launches drones, first off, every day into the city I live in, the capital, Kiev, which is a first world European capital. It's not third world. Someplace that's so destroyed, so corrupt, it's just okay, it's a shithole. No, it's not, actually. And I think that Marco Rubio's, if you've got a second, I'm going to lay this out for you. I know.
Yes.
Okay. So Marco Rubio, for instance, when he made a commentary here a few months ago after getting into office, just like it's just so bad in Ukraine, and it sounds futile at that point. And that means there's nothing to protect. Well, he was just wrong. I mean, there's plenty to protect. There's a lot of places to protect, a lot of people to protect. And I try to equate it to the metaphor of burning down a house. If you went up to someone's house, regardless of size, and found that the lower portion of the garage was on fire, but the rest of the house wasn't on fire yet. Now, a big chunk of the garage is on fire. It's catching on towards the kitchen, but you can still put it out. And then people go, should we get water? Yeah. I mean, it's not the bedroom. Now he's getting mad at me because we're not putting the fire out fast enough. He's wearing a sweater. I mean, that's what it sounds like. There's a lot of things that could have been done during the Biden administration. There's even more that could be done now because we keep learning. And I've said it a couple of years ago. If you didn't like the tax bill that you had now for, $61 billion plus, or actually, whatever the total number is, it's going to be 5 to 10 times more than that when this fails. And Russia and China and Iran, North Korea gain more foothold because America just decided, MAGA.
As our media shrinks, we're going to need folks like you to be honest and report on what's going on here, because, an uneducated populace is one that's easy to control and manipulate, and they are doing a fine job of that. So I thank you again for being here with me today. And I would like to give you an opportunity to just share some last thoughts about journalism, what you do, just speak to the listeners about this important issue, and also tell us where to find you.
Well, thank you, Dee. And I really do appreciate Advocacy Arena. And this is an important form of journalism. This is new media, and this is the present and the future. My message is this: please support your local newspaper. newspapers across North America are disappearing. And when they're gone, you lose your local news coverage. You lose the coverage of your local town council. You lose the local human interest stories. You lose the local public health stories. Once it's gone, and you really need that. I think that's the level of government that affects you most at your municipal level. So please support your local journalists. That's really important. You can find me online at the Kingston Whig Standard, and you can read me at www.thewhig.com, and Whig is spelled W-H-I-G. So as I say, we're Canada's oldest continuously published newspaper, and we plan to be around for a long time to come.
And we also had some lawmakers that joined us, Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons, and digital social influencers who drive the conversation every day. And that was Candidly Tiff and Too Raw, Too Real, Kenny. This is your first term as a representative. I wanted to ask you what the most surprising thing may be that you found when you got into office.
Honestly, I knew that our legislature met on a podium for, 140 days, but I think just being in it, kind of just how jam-packed that actually is. We got sworn in January 14th. We voted on the Speaker of the House that same day. And there's kind of just this lag in between sworn in and committee assignments. So for a couple of weeks, it just felt like things were moving really, really slowly until they weren't. And, it was just very fast paced. And we jam a lot into a very short amount of time. We vote on hundreds of bills a day once we get started. But, from being there from January 14th, I didn't take my first official vote until I want to say about March. And so from, that time till signing die, it's just, kind of hitting up the pavement, moving. I think that was really surprising because people can describe that pace to you, but when you're in it, you're in it. We would think there's days where I get to the Capitol at 7:30, my committee meets at 8, and then it might be, 2 or 3 a.m. before we leave, depending on what the bill is up, or what we're doing on the floor that day. So that was really surprising. And also, I think the other part that was surprising is just knowing how important relationships are. It's 150 of us in the House, 31 senators. On our side, it takes 76 votes to get anything done. It's 62 Democrats, 88 Republicans. And so really having to learn how to navigate that system, find common ground with people that I normally, wouldn't probably even say hello to, and having to figure out how we can work together to get things done for the people of Texas. Going through and understanding what this means for my constituents, what this means for the people in Texas. Most of the bills that we vote on are really non-controversial. Most things pass out of our legislature 100 plus votes. The stuff that you hear about, the things that we argue about, the things that really hurt people and harm people, the stuff that makes the headlines is what typically gets the most attention. But a lot of the day-to-day stuff is just kind of run-of-the-mill bills that really just are doing the work of the state.
One of the things I know as a content creator that you do and you do very well, and I, of course, love, is kind of breaking down simple civics to people.
Yes, ma'am. I was a social studies major, right? And I never used it. I never used it in real life because I went into the healthcare field. So it's like, okay, well, what is it that people are lacking, right? And I think to your point, people are not getting, they may have learned it 10, 20 years ago, but a lot of people have forgotten what the 3 branches of government are, or how, you would think that they wouldn't, but a lot of people have. And they are busy in their lives and they're not thinking about civics or what does it take to get a judge on the bench. Like, they're not thinking about these things. These are things that I think about, right? And you think about, but it's not things that the average person is thinking about. And so how do you bring that to the table and have people understand how these things work? You got to talk to them in the language that they understand, right? Because that's the easiest way. And so I think that's what I've tried to do in terms of civic engagement, is just trying to take a situation and explain, especially judges. Oh my gosh, these judges are the ones that are going to save us at this point. They're our only saving grace to me. And we're starting to see, okay, every time I see a case, I look up the judge. I'm like, oh, that's a Biden judge. I know that judge, So, I tracked every single Biden judge
I started my advocacy or started actually doing videos because I was inspired by a content creator, a political commentator by the name of Reese Colbert. She first started off, with like 400 followers, and she was using her platform to debunk a lot of misinformation that was being spread about then Senator Kamala Harris's prosecutory record. And we all saw, the misinformation. We saw the onslaught of them just lying on this Black woman. So because no matter what we did, even when we were putting up threads and threads and threads and threads of resources, receipts, is saying, oh, well, what you think of Kamala locking up Black men, is it true? I have a statistic that shows you that Kamala Harris did the contrary. She got Black men out of prison, created the Back on Track program. She focused on reentry programs. She focused on safe houses for Black women. She's been a pinnacle for our community. She's done everything when it comes to criminal justice to uplift us, not bring us down. So nobody cared about threads. Nobody wants to read, So I'm like, oh, God. At some point, it just started getting frustrating. So I just said, you know what? Let me turn on my iPhone, get me a little tripod, get me a little ring light. Let me go and get it popping in these streets, and let me just go off. And it was in a way that I was able to resonate with other people's frustration because we reached out to so many people. I mean, we reached out to journalists. We reached out to news pundits. Some that I'm mutuals with now that just did not give a damn, okay? They were just like, I don't care. I'm not doing it. So because they didn't want to do it, it gave us an opportunity to fill a vacant space. And with filling that vacant space, we were able to reach out to other people who were like-minded and also build a true community around uplifting, particularly Black women, leadership in the Democratic Party that are often looked over. People believe the first thing that they see. When they say first impressions are everything, that's pretty much what happens. And it's really hard to change the minds of others when other people have sown these seeds of distrust or misinformation, because unfortunately, like I said, people believe the first thing that they see. And often when they're sharing this information, they're not citing their sources. It's just hearsay. And everybody loves a little gossip child. So the reason why I bring receipts is because when I'm replying, it's a period, no reply. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to do one video, one and done. I don't want to do multiple series of back and forth. I'm just trying to hit you with all the facts and then also throw in some new stuff.
And of course, all of these voices help to educate us. But we also had some guests who were educators and trainers of educators. And that was in the voices of Stephen and Dr. Ty.
Every classroom should be organized around these 5 pursuits. And again, irrespective of standards, location, curriculum, whatever. But if you want literacy, you want these 5 things: identity, intellect, criticality, skills, and joy. And if the classroom teachers can cultivate these things, respect the identity of the students, celebrate it, affirm it, share it, bring it into the community. Intellect means you take the work really seriously and you hold your students in high regard. You challenge them to have high expectations. You're serious about your work. The criticality is, I'm not stuffing you with knowledge. You're becoming an investigator. I'm giving you the ability to challenge yourself. You're asking questions and I'm taking them seriously. I'm stopping the lesson like a freight train if I hear something that is going to be generative from a student. You might hear a district say, no, the pacing calendar, you got to move on. No, stop everything, because authentic learning is spontaneous sometimes. And a teacher who appreciates criticality knows that. Skills speaks for itself. That goes back to phonics. Like, you're not going to get anywhere if you're not doing a little bit of that foundational work. And of course, joy, which I ran a charter school for a long time, and the charter sector has some benefits. But as you know, a lot of issues. One of the issues is artificial shortcuts to things. And there's this thing called joy factor in a lot of charter schools that makes my head shake because it's like, this is going to be really hard for the kids and they're going to hate it. So you make sure you have some joy factor. And are you kidding me? That's the wrong approach. If it's not already joyful, if you're not having fun, what are you doing? Learning is engaging, exciting. Learning is a thrill. So if your program requires you to not forget joy factor. So that's not Ghulam Muhammad's point. Her point is learning is joyful, and you need to recognize, articulate that, surface it, and celebrate it with the kids.
The fraternity in itself, again, gave me things that I am forever indebted to.
Okay.
A sense of brotherhood that I could not gain in the area where I grew up in rural Alabama. A dedication to service that was instilled within my own community and family, but that was really expanded upon as a member of this particular fraternity. And so those pieces, that brotherhood and that service piece, are a part of who I am. And of course, scholarship, which I took quite literally when my grandmother, who was able to acquire a 6th grade education as a little boy, told me, get all the education that you can. And I took that quite literally. And that's what pushed me on to pursue doctoral studies.
Absolutely. Grandma knew knowledge is power.
She knew it. She knew it. Having a huge affinity for our elders. I took every word that I hung on every word that she said, which is why what we're seeing done to education right now is of so much concern. Our country is made up of each, as you stated, small community, no matter how small it is, right? That then joins together to make larger communities and towns and cities and so forth. And at the core of those communities is what they know, is the education piece, which is why another advocacy piece is education and working to ensure that all aspects, in speaking about the subject of history, all aspects of the history of this country are being taught.
You can revisit these episodes. I hope you do, and you will find links to them in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this season of Connections and Conversations. Whether you were here for a single story or every episode, your support helped us build a space rooted in authenticity, engagement, and action. Season 1 may be ending, but the conversations continue. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and most of all, keep connecting.